The details were at the floor of the National Assembly in the preceding week. Now, for many, the 1999 Constitution is basic to most of the challenges that have been bedeviling or rocking the Nigerian nation. So we saw the Senate earlier this week on Tuesday precisely having some amendments voting on certain bills as regards the 1999 Constitution amendment. Now, of the 32 bills presented at the floor of the Senate, we have a situation where the Senate outrightly rejected 4 bills dealing with perhaps the biggest one of all that many Nigerians are talking about at the wake of the call for restructuring Nigeria. Now, the Senate rejected the bill that has to do with the devolution of powers, freedom for women to choose states from which they take appointments or contest election. And also we see the Senate not deleting the Land Use Act, or rather we saw the deletion of the Land Use Act at the floor of the Red Chamber. Now, the Senate, through its approval, sought to curtail the powers of the executive, strengthen the legislature, redefine, as a matter of fact, the electoral laws or the electoral space, especially through the approval of independent candidature in elections, and also strengthening democracy at the local government level. Now, at this proceeding, about 97 senators were present, which a session which was presided over by the Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki. Now, let's take a brief look at the rejected bills at the floor of the Red Chamber. Now, the devolution of power, of course, you know by now, was rejected by senators. The Senate failed to gain a majority as the bill was rejected by 48 votes, with 46 senators supporting it. This particular bill specifically sought to devolve powers to handle railways, collect stamp duties, regulation of electricity, as well as tertiary health institutions to the state. Now, in the same direction, in resisting agitation for restructuring, we have a situation where the senators also rejected proposals to remove the Land Use Act from the Constitution. We talked about that earlier. The Senate also rejected proposals to give constitutional backing for 35% affirmative action for women, and also the proposal to give constitutional guarantees to allow a married woman to use either her indigenship by birth or by marriage in taking up appointments or seeking elective positions. Now, this has kick-started another dimension of controversy in the polity as regards the inclusion of the female gender where politics and political leadership is concerned. Now, let's look at other issues that came up in the outgoing week. There's a lot that this particular passage and voting procedure at the Red Chamber has done to the limitation of the powers of executive office holders. Now, one of it is that the Senate approved the bill to reduce the period within which the president or governor of a state may authorize the withdrawal of monies from the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Now, in the absence of an appropriation act, this has been reduced from 6 months to 3 months. Another such is the approval of the bill to set a time frame within which the president or governor shall forward to the Senate or State of Assembly names of nominees for confirmation as ministers or commissioners. You recall how long it took the current president to submit the name of his ministers after being sworn in on May 29, 2015. They've also approved the bill that constrains the president and governors to present the appropriation bill for the next financial year within 90 days to the end of the ongoing financial year. Now, I don't have to remind you when the 2017 budget was passed into law, but then how feasible is this going to be, having this document submitted to the National Assembly 90 days? That's about 3 months before the end of the year. I mean, when exactly did we even pass the 2017 appropriation bill into law? Now, they also approved the bill to restrict a person who was sworn in. Now, this is very interesting. This is ensuring that the president or a governor cannot contest a second term. Now, how feasible is this going to be? given the kind of system we run. We're going to see how this goes when we have a combined commission, a combined National Assembly sitting on this, as well as when it goes to the 36 states of assembly across the Federation. The Senate has also approved the proposal that would compel the president to appear before the joint sitting of the National Assembly to brief lawmakers on the state of the nation, as well as approving the proposal to grant autonomy to local governments. You've seen that being talked about over the years. Another interesting one is granting immunity to legislators for words and action taken in plenary. They've also approved the separation of the office of the Minister of Justice or Commissioner for Justice from the Attorney General of the Federation of the State. Now, this is arguably the most significant blow to the powers of the president, and which was the approval of the bill they call a Bill 25, which provides for the deletion of Section 315 of the Constitution. Now, what this section does is that it gives the president the powers to make law. Now, if this flies, it means that we're going to see so much more dependency of the executive on the National Assembly. Now, let's begin to wrap this up as we begin our discussion on the show today. There is another important part of this proceeding of the voting we saw in the outgoing week for Nigeria's electoral process. Now, the Senate approved a bill which provides that any party that does not win a seat in any of the offices of the Federation from the local government level to the federal government should be deregistered. So now, all these I don't want to say small parties, but if you refuse to win a seat, you might be deregistered if this particular law is now assented to by the executive and eventually passed into law. Another interesting bill is that the Senate approved the bill to provide for independent candidacy for altering several provisions of the Constitution, which stipulates that an individual can only contest for offices through a political party. However, provisions of the bill as obtained by newsmen stated that the requirements to run as an independent candidate would be stipulated by the National Assembly. Now, the details are sketchy, but then in time we are hopeful that we'll get our hands on it and know what the procedures would be for an independent candidate in time. The Senate also amended the age qualification to contest for elections. The popular bill, not too young to run, has finally flown and been passed by the Senate. So it's a situation where you cannot contest for presidency at the age of 35 as against 40. Now you can also become a senator at 30 instead of 35, the way it was before. House of Representatives and House of Assembly is now 25 instead of 30. Interesting indeed. Now, reactions have started trailing the decisions and the news coming from the National Assembly. According to Afenifere, it is an exercise in futility. Now, Yinka Odumake was quoted to have said that the Constitution review voted upon by the Senate is an exercise in futility as it fails to address the fundamentals. According to him, they have majored only in minors while rejecting the critical issues of federalism or avoiding it. They have confirmed the fears that nationhood cannot be addressed through this National Assembly. They have only put Nigeria rather on the road to auto restructuring. But then the Senate president has a different point of view entirely. According to him, they have, through the amendments that they have done, redefined the budget processes. They have addressed issues that have held Nigeria down for many years. Now, what impact do we see all of these making on our polity in time? I'm joined in a couple of minutes now by analysts who will be shedding more light on all of these developing issues. You can also be a part of the show by sending us a text message. But we'll begin with reactions from some legal practitioners as regards their position on these bills that have been passed at the floor of the National Assembly. Do join us again.
The Steve Adaramoye condemned in strong terms the immunity of legislators for acts in the course of their duty, saying it's just an avenue for legislators to perpetrate crime. On his part, Barrister Yemi Omodele, who commended the adoption of independent candidature, said time will be the true test of his workability.
My sincerity of mind that it is nothing but to satisfy the insatiable ego, to achieve nothing but greed. And to protect the vast empire that have been acquired illegitimately, either corporately or those individual thieves occupying the.
But how independent is independency in Nigeria? How it is? A candidate is to be sponsored by a political party. The composition of a political party comprises human beings, and nobody participates in politics or being a member of a political party that is ready to render a free service without certain things being accrued to him. So the idea of independent candidacy is good, but it's like the legislators, we do respect to them. They did not put Africa factor into consideration before passing into law all these enactments.
While both lawyers observed that the reduction of age for election and deletion of state independent electoral commission from the constitution are steps in the right direction, they, however, berated procedure for overriding presidential veto in constitutional alteration, which was adopted by the Senate.
Of not allowing the assent of the president to certain bills whenever it is passed. I see this as absolutely obnoxious and irresponsible in their own way. So when you look at those things, for instance, why under the heaven do you have to send a bill for the assent of Mr. President? The essence of it, the jurisprudential reason behind it, is to safeguard, to fulfill the sanctity of separation, of the doctrine of separation of power.
National Assembly, they have just passed into law all those bills, but it has not taken effect. It has not been signed by the required authority. So as of today, the 1999 Constitution, the inherited 1999 Constitution, will still be in place. So the SIAC will still be working until that law, the bill is signed into law, until it becomes Act of National Assembly, before it takes effect. But to me and my mind, I believe that the members of the National Assembly, they are self-centered in the sense that they want to be Mr. Know-all.
Barrister Daramoye went further to explain that if these amendments are allowed to see the light of day, they will total negation from the principles of checks and balances.
Glad to have you join us again. You're watching Editors Forum exclusive to Galaxy Television. We're turning our attention this Saturday to 1999 Constitution Amendment vis-a-vis what we've seen played out at the floor of the National Assembly in the outgoing week. I'm joined on the show right now with distinguished personalities. Biodun Shomi is always exciting to have you come on the show. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Dipo Layoko, I guess it's your demo on Editors Forum. He's a public affairs analyst who joins us for the first time today. Thanks for being a part.
Maybe you are talking of the new Editors Forum.
Yeah, okay.
We have been on Editors for more than 10, 12 years, if I can remember vividly.
Oh my.
Maybe someone first took a sabbatical.
That was a long time before I joined Galaxy TV. Glad to have you, Carl.
It's always a pleasure.
Victor High, broadcast journalist. Thank you so much for all
Thank you for having me.
All right, so it's interesting what we've seen played out in the preceding week. Let me start with you, Biodun Shomi. The biggest expectation of Nigerians at this time is the devolution of power and the role it plays in the recent call for restructuring of Nigeria. Would you say you're surprised that a bill specifically sought to dissolve powers to handle railways, collect stamp duties, regulation of electricity and tertiary health institutions to the states have now been rejected by both houses. I'm talking about the Senate and the House of Representatives.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. When you actually look at the situation, let me give you an analogy. You know, it's like expecting the National Assembly to legislate its own privileges and interest away. The privileges and interests are not the same with the national interest. They are strictly for their own personal benefit. When you look at the issues, all the issues addressed by the Senate, they are all issues around procedural, not structural. Then they did not go right to the foundation and the root cause of our faulty federalism. What is unitary, which we describe as federalism. There are all issues around, oh, we disagree with Mr. President, he didn't present ministers in 6 months, you know, to the issue of we need, Mr. President does not need to sign the Constitution, to the issue of Mr. President needs to appear before us once in a year or give state of address. They are not issues germane, you know, to the structural problems which we find in the country. They are issues of procedures. What do you do about this and all that, which portray the Senate as not being serious. As far as I can see it, we need to understand where we are currently. Our country is badly threatened, you know, by two different streams. One is we must be united at all costs under unitary federal unitary system. The other is secession. We don't want both, and that is why people in their own wisdom, many Nigerians are clamoring for restructuring of the country. Interestingly, the ruling party, the APC, also pledged devolution of powers. To those who say they don't understand the meaning of restructuring or it means different things to different people, it simply means true federalism. Practice federalism the way it's supposed to be practiced. Devolve the powers and responsibilities, including the fiscal control over resources, you know, to the constituent parts, and then the constituent parts will pay tax to the center only to maintain defense, foreign affairs, monetary policy, and the borders. That's essentially what it is. So what the Senate has tried to do, and both assets of the National Assembly, what they've tried to do is to ignore the problem and then say, look, we will fine-tune it piecemeal. And that is exactly what Nigerians want, because we are in a very dire situation currently.
Victor, looking at how close the voting pattern is on the issue of devolution of power, the Senate failed to gain a majority as the bill was rejected by 48 votes, with 46 supporting it. Would you say that even the National Assembly understand what it means right now that Nigeria needs to be restructured?
Well, again, because I was in an earlier discussion with my brother here, Dipo, and we're looking at the fact that sometimes in order to be able to give a fair assessment, it's better to know and understand those, first of all, what the voting pattern, you know, was during that particular session, because it then tells you, if I were to guess, obviously, it's like what happened at independence. This is like deja vu all over again. At the point of independence, some were ready, others were not. You know what I mean? So the group that was ready was, you know, let's go, let's go. The other group was saying, look, cool down. We want to, at our own pace, you know. So it's recurring all over again. Restructuring down south, you know, and maybe up to the middle belt, people are ready. You know, they're ready for it. I'm speaking generally. I don't know the voting pattern to say for sure. So I may not be having an empirical background for what I'm saying. But just with general knowledge and what we know and what we hear, I'm assuming that the North is afraid of restructuring. We've heard the Arewa youth speak. We've heard the Northern elders speak, okay? Except for lone voices like Atiku and a few like that. These are, and even Atiku is not called North. It's like, you know, it's like, you know, it's from Adama. Is it Taraba? Adama. Yes. Okay. So now you'll find that, you know, a lot of them are scared because they don't understand what it means. I mean, imagine what will happen. I mean, imagine that all this while, at the end of the month, you just sit down from nowhere. VAT from beer that is sold in Lagos is distributed and given to you. Oil that is tapped from Lagos, Niger Delta, Ondo, they tap it, you just sit down, they share. You understand what I'm saying? You collect free money, you know? Meanwhile, you're sitting on gold, you are letting the Chinese steal the gold, you are not doing anything about it. You don't have to wait. In fact, you can privately mine it and sell it and dispose of it. So there is that problem. Then again, let us not forget, when I was talking, you know, looking at specific points and all that, these people were talking about, some of them are heading committees. The man in charge of railway and all that, now you are telling him now that suddenly he will have no job anymore. When you devolve everything and then it's no longer under them, what are they, what is that language again when you supervise? What's the language for it? Oversight.
Oversight.
So there is nothing to oversee anymore. You know, so you cannot blame them. These people too, self-preservation, I think is what is guiding, or why we call it greed or whatever. It doesn't matter that they may not be there forever, but while they are there, they ought to protect that which belongs to them. I mean, it has informed to a very large extent some of these decisions. Otherwise, just listening to the voices on the street, again, let me let you take that, because we had a conversation. Okay. I want him to talk about some of those aspects, so it's not like I take...
So, Diko, in addition to rejecting devolution of power, both the Senate and the House of Representatives also rejected proposals to remove the Land Use Act from the Constitution. We seem to have a situation where the National Assembly is supposed to be representative of the people. Is this also showing that perhaps if we go to referendum, we're not as united on this restructured thing as the media makes us believe?
Yes, Victor was trying to say something because we engaged in a discussion before we came in front of the camera. And then we were looking at when we sit down in the South here and conclude that Nigerians want the abolition of powers. Nigerians want the structuring. Then we will be restricting Nigerians to the people in the South or in the Southeast or in the South generally. Have we been on the streets in the North to know what an average Northerner wants? Does he even understand this thing we are talking about, especially from the perspective of there's a ready-made revenue allocation for him? The guy on the street doesn't know what it means when you're talking about structuring. So we might be making some mistakes when we say the lawmakers are not representing us, because us could be down here. This is what our representatives have gone there to vote, because like Victor said, we don't know the voting pattern. We can only be making some conjectures that, okay, maybe those 48 who rejected are from the North. Let us just assume. Are we sure that the people on the streets of the North are really on the same page with us here? So if the representative from the North say, I'm not going to support the abolition of power, how are we sure that it's not propounding the theory from the people on the street? But I think the most important thing, you talk about the Land Use Act, the NYSC, the Public Complaints Commission, and the other one. The question is, are they really supposed to be in the Constitution? Because there's a problem that many Nigerians don't understand, or let us say our lawmakers don't understand. Because the moment you make something a constitutional provision, that means no matter whatever happens, it must be abided with. Let me just digress a little into the issue of the 35% affirmative stuff that we are talking about. One guy raised one very important issue on the program I listened to today. He said if it is put in the constitution that every cabinet must be made up of 35%, even at local state government level, that how are we sure that some states will be able to provide enough female manpower that will fill that gap of 35%? And if we're not able to produce 35% of ladies that will fill the cabinet, what happens? That means the cabinet that governor is going to have is going to be null and void. So there are certain things that we shouldn't be putting in the constitution, because the moment they go into constitution, it becomes what must be accomplished. Then let me just start from what Biodun said, that maybe Nigerians said, some of Nigerians were surprised as the way the National Assembly voted in this constitutional constitutional alteration, because Nifemi told us that it's not amendment, but it's alteration. I don't know if you expect somebody to commit what we call class suicide, or class suicide.
Or political harakiri.
Or political harakiri. Because let me tell you something, if you look at all the amendment that these guys carried out, it is an amendment to make sure that their position is consolidated and to make sure that they weaken the position of their foe, FOE. That is what they have done by targeting the executive, because every law must be fair, just, and then must be devoid of self-interest. And this is exactly what has played out in the last, is what these guys are doing. But you see, the only saving grace and the only succor is that if you look at the constitutional provision, because yes, the legislative power has been given to them, according to, I think, Section 2 or Section 3 of the Constitution. And if you go to Section 5, Section 9, it says, yes, this thing must be done in line with the provisions of the Constitution, this alteration. And it goes further to say, even after the two houses might have, even if they agreed on any issue, and interestingly, many of the issues, the two of them did not agree, that means that one is dead on arrival. It doesn't even need to go to the state local government, to the state House of Assembly, because that's what the Constitution says, that before it even goes to the House of Assembly or the states, the two houses must have agreed on an issue. And how do they agree? They must have agreed to the point of 2/3 of the two houses must have agreed on any issue. Then even the one that has been able to scale through. For example, look at the issue of local government autonomy. You think a House of Assembly will open its eyes and endorse that, when that is the only thing they hold, and you want them to forfeit that to the federal lawmakers. So it is very, very unfortunate that the federal lawmakers did not take the national interest into consideration. But let me conclude by using the word of my mechanic who told me a story one day. There was a time I was having a problem with my car, the same issue. I would take it to the guy. After 1 month, the issue will occur again. Eventually, a friend directed me to another mechanic. And just one fix it, and it was a fix-it-all solution. So I went back to him and said, come, do I mean that other guy doesn't know his job? Or why was he said, okay, if he has done it and you don't have to go back to him, how will he make money again? So what National Assembly is doing with the amendment of Constitution or alteration of Constitution is what they see it as a periodic national cake to share. Because if you know the humongous amount of money they allocate to this alteration every year, and the Deputy Senate President is always at the end of affairs, you can imagine what they are making of it. So they will never amend or alter the Constitution in such a way that it will be once and for all. They will always be doing it this means, so that in the next 2 years, Nigeria will begin to shout again, constitutional amendment, and it's another job for boys again.
It's all right. Let's bring in the viewer here. We really apologize. We're having challenges with our school bar at the moment, but you can send us a text via 080-3518-1304. Now you can send us a text message, not call, 080-3518-1304. We'd love to hear from you as regards the ongoing process of altering the 1999 Constitution. Now the number to send a text to again is 080-3518-1304. We'll wait to hear from you. Now let's move this conversation forward. There's a perception that the National Assembly through its approvers, have sought to curtail the powers of the executive. There are a couple of bills here reducing the period within which the president or the governor may authorize withdrawal of monies from the Consolidated Revenue Fund from 6 months to 3 months. There's also another interesting bill here that is saying that governors or president cannot contest for a second term in office. Now, the thought of such bill is the one saying that it is deleting the section of the Constitution that gives the president the powers to make law. Do you see these bills flying? And what's the impact on it, on the relationship that exists currently between the executive and the legislature?
Yeah, it's quite unfortunate that we find ourselves in this situation. Because when you look at what the National Assembly has done, is basically to focus on issues between them and the executive. They are not looking at issues affecting Nigerians. They are not looking at, for instance, is this true federalism? Is this how we're supposed to practice it? What do we need to do? In a true federalist system, you're bound to have constitutions, of different constituent parts. For instance, in the old confederal arrangement, Western region has its own constitution, Northern region has its own constitution, Eastern region. Those constitutions took account of their peculiarities. For instance, the example Dikwa was given earlier on about maybe a particular area might not even be able to provide 35%,